Chapter 24 of Dr. Adriaan by Louis Couperus. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. It was spring, and Marietje van Satsema was to go to The Hague for the day, to see her father and mother. Constance went with her. "How well Marietje was looking!" cried Adolphine with delight. Marietje certainly looked well. She would always remain a little pallid, frail and thin, with narrow shoulders, but her cheeks had filled out, her eyes showed a dewy calmness, and her lips, pale though they were, blossomed into a kindly smile. She was, as usual, a little subdued, but she joined in the conversation, and her attitude was more natural, less painful and forced. "But you must leave her with us for the summer as well," said Constance, "for the poor girl hasn't had much out of the country air during the winter. It is beginning to look lovely now where we are. She'll spend a summer with us first, Adolphine, won't she, before you take her back?" "Very well," said Adolphine gratefully. But presently, when she was alone with her sister, she found an opportunity to say, "At least, if there are no objections." "What objection could there be?" "Because of Addie." "What do you mean?" "People are so spiteful sometimes, you know. They say—" "What do they say?" "They say that Addie is in love with Marietje, and that Marietje does her best to attract him." "I should let them talk, Fien." "What do you believe, Constance?" "I don't believe a word of it. Addie is in love with his wife." "That's just it. People say—" "What do they say now?" "That things are not going so very well between Mathilde and Addie." "Every young couple has a difficult time now and again, a little difference of opinion. I assure you, they are happy together." "Is that so?" "Yes. It was Mathilde's wish to come and live here. It was better that she should be on her own, in her own house." "Oh, she didn't have a scene with you then? That's what people say." "I never had a single word with Mathilde. I see her once in a way. She does not talk nicely of you. She says that she was sacrificed to Gerrit's children, that she did not count at home. When she talks like that, I defend you, for I know how nice you and Van der Welcke are to everybody. She may have had a bitter moment that made her speak like that." "She goes out a lot," said Adolphine. "When? Whom does she go to?" "In the evening. Friends. She is hardly ever at home of an evening. She oughtn't to do that, without Addie, you know. It's so undomesticated. I know she goes out now and then of an evening to have tea, with friends." "Yes, exactly. She's always out. But how well Marietje is looking, Constance. She does Addie great credit. He's making a great reputation with his hypnotism. Everyone wants to be hypnotized by him. I'm always hearing him praised." "I'm so glad, Adolphine." She went away, arranging to fetch Marietje in the afternoon and take her back to Driebergen. She had an open fly waiting. It was beautiful, mild weather, and the spring was weaving verdure in between the trees. But a heavy load lay on Constance's breast, and she could have cried, because of her boy, because of Addie. She was going to ride to him now, at the other end of the town, the Emmerstraat. She meant to lunch there, and when she had seen the grandchildren to come back to Adolphine's. It was 11 o'clock, and she felt so much weighed down with sorrow for Addie, who came home to them looking more and more gloomy every week, that she could not go to him yet. After all that Adolphine had said. Oh, how she always loved saying things that jarred upon your nerves, things that hurt, things that grated against your soul. Did she do it purposely? Was she insincere? Or was it because she couldn't help it? Because she was tactless? Or, very likely, took an unconscious pleasure in hurting people? Oh, perhaps she did not know how much pain she gave. But to go straight to Addie now, to Mathilde, was impossible. "Cabman, drive a little way through the woods first." The driver turned down the Javerstraat, went along the Scheveningen road, and let his horse roam at will in the rides of the woods. Oh, the Hague was charming. She loved the woods, even as Addie loved Driebergen, with an innate, inherited love for the house and household, and the fact of living there. He was indeed his grandparents' grandchild, so she loved the Hague greatly. She loved those green villa-lined roads. She loved the briny fragrance of the sea. She was now riding along the ornamental water, now suddenly along the spot where she remembered meeting Browse years ago, he sitting on that bench yonder, when, after she had turned round with a start, he caught her up, and her confession that she had suggested a divorce to Henri. Oh, those days of life and suffering and illusion, so far away in the distant past. And now the man drove with his jog-trot, the jog-trot of a Victoria hired by the hour, along the Kerkhoflaan. Now she was riding past the old house. Oh, that old house! It was as though the past, the illusion, the suffering and the life, the later life, were still hanging around it like a low-drifting cloud. It was the trees of yore, and the skies of yore, and the green spring life of yore. The house, there was the window at which she had so often sat musing, gazing at the great skies overhead, while her soul travelled along a path of light. Up above were Addie's little turret room and her own bedroom. Oh, that night of illusion at the open window, with the noiseless flashes of hope over the sea, the distant sea yonder. She felt almost inclined to stop, to alight, to ask leave to go over the house, but something in the curtains, in the outline of a woman sketching at the window of her former boudoir, prevented her, and she rode on. Oh, how she loved her Hague, and yet she had suffered there. With what antipathy she had been surrounded! Did that antipathy of small souls for small souls go on for ever? Must her poor boy now suffer through it, even though he made his name as a doctor? Oh, what a heavy depression she felt upon her heart, as if her fur cloak were much too warm for the balmy weather with its breath of spring. Now they were going down the Bankerstraat, past poor Gerrit's old house, and suddenly that terrible night of snow stood white hideous before her mind, stained dark with her brother's blood. Here was Doreen's boarding-house, and Constance got out and rang, but Doreen was not in. The driver jogged on wearily. She recognised acquaintances here and there, grown older now that her memories were harking back to past years. And the cabmen, doubtless to spin out the drive, instead of following the canal, turned up the Alexanderstraat. Oh, the house! The old family house! So full of recollections, so full of the past. And she saw that it was empty, that it was to let. With a quick glance at the uncurtained windows above, she even recognised the plasterwork of the ceilings, and it was as though the past still brooded there, still stared out at her through the white, streaked windows. Wearily, the horse now jogged along the Bezoudenhout, and she saw poor Bertha's house, with its tightly drawn veil of chill panes, stiff and repelling a swift penetrating glance. Yes, the Hague was like a grave to her, and yet, even as a grave, the Hague was dear to her. A grave? And Addie lived down there at the end of the street. Would she still care to live in the Hague? She did not know. Perhaps she was becoming used to Driebergen, becoming used to the big sombre house there, because there was so much love around her, even though she continued to feel a stranger there, and a stranger, that was how her boy felt here. The carriage now pulled up outside her boy's house. Strange, the front door was open. Perhaps the maid was out on an errand, and had left the door open for a minute to save herself trouble. Constance, telling the driver to come back at 2:30, went inside. Addie could hardly be home yet from visiting his patients. She knocked at the door of the drawing-room and received no answer. Mathilde was no doubt busy with the children or with her housekeeping. Constance opened the door and walked in to look for her. She gave a start. Through the drawing-room and the dining-room she saw Mathilde sitting in the conservatory, with Johannes Seele beside her. He sat bending towards her, and he was holding her hand in his too. Mathilde's eyes were staring into the distance, and the feeble hesitation seemed to take away something of the usual strength of her fine, healthy, rather full lines. Constance saw it for one moment, as a strange vision in that bright, unsoftened conservatory light, which was made the harder with many-coloured muslin curtains, and coarsely vivid with the gold and motley of ugly Japanese fans. It gave Constance a fright, and in that inexorable light, the fright and the vision were both inexorable. It did not last longer than a second. Her shadow in the drawing-room made Mathilde and Johann start up, and they rose to their feet. "Mamma! Mrs. van der Welcke!" It sounded like a greeting, but their voices were unsteady, because they understood that Constance had seen. Constance's voice trembled, but she merely said, "Good morning, dear. How do you do, Mr. Seele?" She kissed Mathilde, shook hands with Seele. "I came over with Maricha. I left her with her father and mother, and came to look you up, intending to lunch with you, if it suits you." She strove to make her words and her voice sound quite unaffected, and she succeeded, and because she succeeded, she suddenly felt that what she had seen was nothing, a moment of familiar intimacy. Were they not old friends? Had Mathilde not, as a girl, when he was still a cadet, danced with him often at their dancing club? There was nothing. She was reassured by the tranquillity of her own voice. "So you will stay to lunch?" said Mathilde. "If it suits you." "Of course it does. Addie is not in yet. Are the children upstairs?" "Yes, I'll send for them." Seele said goodbye, that he must go, reminded Mathilde easily of her appointment to meet him the next day at the tennis club. Constance glanced at him quickly. In his uniform he was young, broad and short, his complexion fair but bronzed with the sun. Above his powerful shoulders and thick neck, his face stood fresh and strong, smart military, with a pair of glad, childlike grey eyes. A long fair moustache shaded his lips, which were laughing, glad, and warmly sensual, and when he laughed, his small sharp ivory teeth flashed, his thick fair hair curled slightly at the tips. It was very strange, but it struck her suddenly that Seele's way of looking at Mathilde resembled that of her own husband, van der Welcke, when he was young, when she met him in Rome. Something in the fresh vigour of his glance and of his rather sensual laugh, something about his figure, about his teeth, reminded her of Henri as a young man. "You've known him for a long time, haven't you?" asked Constance when he was gone. "Oh dear, yes," said Mathilde vaguely. The nurse brought down Yetje and Constance for Grandmamma to see. After that, the children were to go out for a little longer. "They look well," said Constance huskily. She felt a heavy pressure of inexplicable melancholy on her heart, a pressure so heavy that she could have cried, so heavy that she felt her eyes grow moist in spite of herself. "Yes," said Mathilde, "they are very healthy. It's quite a system that Addie and I are practising with that special diet, and the regular time each day in the open air. The other day it was blowing a gale, and Addie absolutely insisted that they should go out all the same, and I must say I agree with him." Suddenly, while Yetje was sitting on her lap, and Constance tugging at her skirts, Constance took Mathilde's hand. "Then things are all right between you," she whispered, almost imploringly. "How do you mean? You are happy now, Mathilde, here at The Hague?" "Certainly, Mamma. You yourself understood, didn't you, that I longed for a house of my own? Yes, dear, I understood. Emilie. What? I'm sorry to have robbed you of Addie. But, my dear, a son does not belong to his parents. Still, I reproach myself, but I could not stay with you any longer. You understand that it was not because you were not kind to me. You were very kind. You tried to be, though I do not believe that Papa likes me, that Emilie, Aunt Adeline, or any of the others like me. I bear them no malice. I don't like them either. Constance was silent. I'm so different from the boy and girl cousins, and Papa was always jealous. My dear. And you too, but you fought against it. Mathilde, I always wished you to feel at home with us. I always hoped that some part of you would blend with us. Exactly, and that was impossible. I was too different from all of you, and at Driebergen, in the end, I should have become as full of nerves as Mary. There was a tint of hatred in her voice. No, dear, said Constance, harking back. You were not happy with us, but because I hope that you are happy now. She had risen nervously. The nurse had entered and was taking the children with her. They were to have one more turn in the street before lunch. Tell me, Mathilde, are you really happy? Do you really and truly love Addie again? I have always loved him. What do you mean? Then it's all right. Then it's all right, dear. Why are you so sad? There are tears in your eyes. The Hague always makes me sad. The cabman took me for a little drive, and I passed all the houses of the old days when we all used to live here. Did you feel a longing to come back to the Hague? No, no, I don't want to come back again. Will you always remain at Driebergen? Yes, I think so. You have found happiness there. I did not. I remained a stranger. Tilly, one day perhaps you will live there as we do now, when we are no longer there. No, never. Why not? I dislike the house and everything in it, down to the very doorposts. I can't get used to an eerie house, as you all do. But Addie, exactly, he will never forget the house. What can it be to him? He was not born there. He feels at home there. Just so, and I do not. Oh, I ought never to have married him. Tilly, what are you saying? I ought never to have married him. And you love him. I have loved him, oh, very dearly, but he is far above me. I do not reach his level. He sacrifices himself for me, and it breaks my heart to accept his sacrifice. It oppresses me. Oh, Mamma, find something for us. Let him go back to you all, and let me stay here with the children. I shall live simply, in a small upper part, and practice economy. It is all my fault, not his. He is good and kind and magnanimous, but all that oppresses me. I thought at first that we were, how shall I put it, akin to each other, kindred natures. When we got married, I used not to think about such things, but I thought in myself, with an unconscious certainty, that we were akin. He was so nice, so straightforward and so manly, and that rather elderly something appealed to me. I used to look up to it without being oppressed by it. Gradually I began to feel that he was far above me. Things I like leave him indifferent. Little luxuries, fashion, gaiety, society. That hypnotism of his. At first I used to think, this is something new, a new method. Now I don't know. I'm becoming afraid of it. I'm becoming afraid of him. There is something in him that frightens me. Oh, I know it is only because he is so good and so big, and because I feel very small and ordinary, because I don't understand those fine, lofty ideals about doing good, and about poor people, and about self-sacrifice. To him it all comes natural. He is sacrificing himself now for me. He does not care for the Hague or for his practice here, whereas I could never live at Driebergen again. And even if I could feel more or less at home among you all, even then Addie would oppress me. Do you understand? Oh, you are crying. Of course you are angry with me. You see your son above everything. That is easily understood. And I still have enough love left for Addie to understand it all. But you see, the love I still have for him is an anxious love. It's a sort of self-reproach that I am as I am and not different. A sort of remorse caused by all kinds of things I don't understand and can't express. Things that make me cry when I am by myself and oppress me until I sometimes feel as if I was suffocating. Hush, dear, here he is. They both ceased and listened. They heard Addie's voice. Coming home, he had met the children outside the house. Constance and Mathilde heard his deep voice sound kindly, playfully in the hall. He now opened the door with Jetje on one arm and little Constant toddling by his side with his hand in his father's. "Mamma!" he exclaimed in surprise. "I had no idea that you were here." "No, my boy. I came up unexpectedly. I brought Maricha with me and left her with her father and mother. You'll stay to lunch, of course." "I should like to." "Why, what's the matter with you, Mamma?" "The matter? And with you, Mathilde?" "With me? Nothing." He saw that they had been talking together. He said nothing more, however, but played with the children for a while, and then released himself and gave them over to the nurse who had come in. "The youngsters are looking first-rate, aren't they?" "We shall have lunch in a minute, Mamma," said Mathilde tonelessly. Addie sat down beside his mother, took her hand, smiled. Mathilde left the room with her keys. "Don't fret, Mamma," he said. "My boy, you're fretting. You look so sad." My dear, I—" "What?" She gave a sob and laid her hand on his shoulder. She was so frightened that it was as though her great dread stifled her and prevented her from breathing. She trembled in his embrace. "You won't fret, will you, dear?" "No." The maid came to lay the table in the dining room. Constance controlled herself. "Mamma," he said jestingly, now that Mathilde also returned, "you're losing all your vanity. That's a nice old blouse to come and see your son in. Look, it's wearing out at the elbows. Do you know, you haven't looked at all smart lately." "Oh, my dear boy, this blouse is quite good still." "Well, I think it's seen its best days. What do you say, Tilly?" "Why should I get myself up? An old woman like me," said Constance. "You'll never be old, Mummy, and a well-turned-out woman must always remain well-turned-out. Do you remember the old days?" "Yes, when you brought home that fine photograph from Nice." She smiled through her tears. "My boy, that is all so long ago. You thought me a bundle of vanity then. The photograph never leaves my writing table. Mamma, you mustn't let yourself go like that." "Very well, I don't wear this blouse any more, but it costs so much to dress nicely, and we have so many expenses." "You were not rich in the old days," said Mathilde, piqued at something that she did not understand. "And yet Mamma wore dresses that cost 600 francs, said Addie chaffingly. "Yes, and now that you are well off." "Now I never dream of doing such a thing," said Constance gently. The luncheon was quiet, a little melancholy, a little constrained. Afterwards, things went a little more merrily, because Jetje and Constance came downstairs again with their nurse, suddenly in a very youthful vision of golden hair, seen through the open door. Their little voices chirped like those of young birds, and Constance could not refrain from saying how much they all missed them at Driebergen. For there also they were always coming down the stairs, looking so young and so golden, like a vision of the future, to go walking out of doors. Even in the winter they brought a hint of sunshine and of spring, something refreshing of youth and beginning, a promise of future in the old house, which was so gloomily full of things of the past, things that hovered about the rooms, gleamed out of the mirrors, trailed, like strange draughts, along the lightly creaking stairs. Mathilde did not say much. She was silent and sat with her lips closed, and her whole face, her eyes half shut, closed, after that sudden irresistible betrayal of her feelings to her mother-in-law, to whom nevertheless she was attracted by no sort of sympathy. A little while later, Constance's carriage came to fetch her, and Addie offered to go to the Van Satzemas with her and see how Maricha was. "And what are you doing, Mathilde?" asked Constance gently. "I don't know. I expect I shall go out, or I may stay at home." Addie went upstairs to get ready, and Constance suddenly took Mathilde in her arms. "My dear, Mamma, you did well to speak out to me just now, however sad it made me feel. You did right." "Oh, why did I do it? I should have done better to hold my tongue." "No, no, speak. Oh, do speak to Addie too." "I have spoken to him so often." "Not lately?" Mathilde shrugged her shoulders. "No, not so often lately. What's the use? It's not his fault. It's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, and it can't be helped." "Very likely, only—" "Only what, Mamma?" "Be careful, Mathilde. I implore you. Oh, do be careful. Everything can come right again. You are sure to come together again later. But be careful, be careful. Don't spoil your life." They looked deep down into each other's eyes. "Mathilde, I may speak openly to you, mayn't I? Just because it's I, dear, your mother, who suffered so very much, because she spoilt her life so, spoilt it so, when she was young, and her life became a torture. I was a young woman as you are, Mathilde, and I wasn't happy, any more than you are, my poor child, at the moment, and—" "I know, Mamma," Mathilde replied shortly. "Yes, you know all about it, of course you know, dear, though I have not mentioned it to you. But just because of all that, I may tell you, may I not, to be careful. Oh, do be careful." "You are afraid of things that don't exist." "No, dear, there is nothing. I know there's nothing. Only—" "What?" "You see, when I arrived this morning—" "Ed Sailor was with me." "Yes." "He's an old friend." "I know. He came to make an appointment, to play tennis tomorrow." "Yes, I heard him." "There was nothing else." "He was holding your hand." "He's an old friend, whom I knew as a girl, almost as a child." "Yes, dear, I know, but—" "What do you mean?" "It is dangerous." "What is?" "To talk to him too much, while you're in your present frame of mind. If you're feeling unhappy, dear, about one thing or another, speak to Addie." "I've spoken to him so often." "Confide in him." "I have." "And not in Johanna Sailor." Mathilde's eyes blazed. "Mamma, you haven't the right." "Yes, dear, I have. I not only have the right to tell you this as Addie's mother, but above all, I have the right because I understand you, because I am able to understand you, because I remember my own wretchedly unhappy years of despair as a young married woman, unsatisfied, unhappy, desperate, though for other reasons, alas, than those between you and Addie. Because I remember all this, Mathilde, because I can never forget, just because I remember, because I now remember how I used to talk to Papa when I was married to my poor old husband, how I used to talk to Papa and try to find consolation in those talks, and how we worked ourselves up with those talks until— oh, Mathilde, let me tell you all about it. Let me tell you all about it, quite simply, even though you know, so that I may have the right to speak to you. I used to talk to Papa, and we fell in love with each other. We thought we loved each other. And if you thought so, Why didn't you?" "Because it wasn't true, dear. Because it wasn't a burning fire of feeling. Because it was an unreal feeling, arising from unreal words between a young woman and a young man, until all those talks drove them into each other's arms, and the awful thing became irrevocable. Mamma, I'm telling you everything, dear. I know everything, Mamma, but you say you used to have unreal talks with Papa. Yes, I talk simply to Johann. My dear, it's not that. I myself was unreal in those days, in my feelings, which came out of books which I had read. Papa used to answer out of those same books. You are different. You are simple. Etzela, a friend of your childhood, is simple. A simple-minded fellow. Your talks are bound to be different. Our talks are simple. But when I came in, I saw that you were talking, confidentially, intimately and eagerly, and that he was holding your hand, holding your two hands. Yes, you saw that. He was consoling me. That's exactly what he mustn't do. That's exactly what he mustn't be allowed to do. Oh, Mathilde, I am an old woman, and I am your mother, especially now that you have no mother of your own, and I am Addie's mother, and I understand. I understand everything, because I myself have suffered so much. Addie's coming downstairs, Mamma. Promise me, dear, to be careful. I will be careful. And forgive me for everything that I have dared to say. Kiss me. Oh, I long so intensely for you and Addie to be happy again." She took Mathilde in her arms, passionately, and kissed her twice, 3 times. Addie entered. "I'm ready, Mamma. The carriage is waiting." I'm coming, my boy." End of chapter 24. Chapter 25 of Dr. Adriaan by Louis Couperus. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Summer came suddenly. Fine sunny days followed one after the other. All the windows in the big house were opened, and the summer seemed to enter and drive everything of winter out of the open windows. The spreading garden became closely leaved with a green and gold triumph of dense foliage, which, lightly stirred by the wind, cast shadows over the pond with a play of alternating flecks of light and shade. Van der Welcke, strolling along the paths, found pleasure in watching Klaasje, the big girl of 13, tearing round the water, pursued by Jack, the new terrier, who barked and barked incessantly with his sharp, throaty bark. "She is still just like a child," thought Van der Welcke, "and she is developing like a little woman. It is strange the influence that Addie has over her, and the way that the child is perking up now that the fine days have come. But it is not only the fine days, it is Addie above all that gives her this balance. What's it through, I wonder? Purely through his influence, through a sort of healing magic that flows from him. It is very strange. The other day I had a terrible headache, and, when he came and just gave me a little massage, it was gone, quite. And the way the fellow has succeeded in developing the child's mind with those picture books, with those coloured things. It's as though he wanted to affect her by means of colourings and glitterings and I don't know what. In any case, it came off. She's really learning her lessons very well, and everything she says is more reasonable and sensible. It's as though she were catching herself up. Yes, amuse yourself, child. Look how wildly excited she is with that dog. Like a real child, she's enjoying the fine weather. She's just like a child of nature, and she looks well too. She'll grow into a pretty girl, though she's a trifle heavily built. She no longer has that stupid look in her eyes, and there's something kind and genuine about her. In her behaviour towards old Mamma and Ernst, something motherly and understanding combined, as if she felt she had something in common with their clouded minds. It's jolly to look at the child, to see her sprouting and blossoming, exactly like a plant that is now receiving just the right light and just the right amount of water. And yet she owes it all to Addie, and will very likely never know that she owes it to him. Yes, the fellow wields a wonderful influence. Alex is keeping his end up now in Amsterdam, and seems to be losing some of his melancholia since Addie had been talking to him so regularly. Poor chap, he was 10 years old when he saw his father lying dead in all that blood, and it affected him for all time. We were right to take all those children to live with us. That sort of thing gives a man an object in life, even me, though I myself do nothing, though it's Constance and Addie who act. I feel a certain satisfaction, even though I just let them do as they please. Who would ever have thought that it would become like this, the big, lonely house, where father and mother lived so very long, and sadly by themselves, now so full as a refuge for Constance's family. It turned out so strangely, so very strangely. Oh, if my boy were only happier! Who would have thought that he who has everything in his favour, should go falling in love with a woman who cannot make him happy? I'm always thinking about it. I get up with it. I go to bed with it. I see the two of them in the smoke of my cigarette, and I am beginning to worry about it, proof that I'm getting old. And I can see that Constance also worries about it, that the thought of Addie and that woman is always with her. Oh, everything might have turned out so happily, but it was not to be. It was not to be. A lovely summer morning like this almost makes a fellow melancholy. Yes, it makes you melancholy, because you know for certain that it won't long remain so. That calmness in the air, that beautiful clear sky, that green and gold of the trees, and that it will soon become different, full of sadness and of gloomy things. He suddenly spread out his arms, for Clasha, pursued by the dog, came rushing down the path in his direction without seeing him, as it were blinded by the game which he was playing. Uncle Henry, let me go. Jack will catch me. Mind and don't tumble into the water, Van der Welcke warned her, but she had already released herself from his arms and was running on with the dog after her. She's gone wild, he thought, wild with the joy of life. She's beginning to wake up, physically and mentally. It's as though a twilight were there, withdrawing from her, a twilight which is beginning to steal over me. What is the matter with me? What do I feel? Oh, I long to go bicycling, to go for a long spin. But Addie's not here, and even when he is, he has no time, and Guy's working. Suppose I asked Gerrit. She's fond of a little run. He went in through the conservatory. The old woman was sitting there, staring quietly out of the window. Adeline was busy with the plants. Well, Mummy, how are you? What do you say to this fine weather? What? What do you say, Mum, to this fine weather? The old lady nodded her head contentedly. Lovely, lovely, she said. The wet monsoon is over. But tell Gertrude to be careful of the river behind the palace. Her voice sounded like a voice from the past, and spoke of things of the past. Where is Gerrit? Van der Welcke asked Adeline. In the drawing-room. Uncle Paul's in there playing. He heard the piano. Paul was improvising. Van der Welcke found Gerrit leaning over the back of her chair, very pale. I say, dear, come for a ride with me. It'll freshen you up. She looked at him dejectedly, shook her head. I have a headache. That's just why you ought to come, dear. Come along, do, to please me. He stroked her hair. She took his hand and put it to her lips. Come. Really, Uncle, my head's too bad. Then why don't you go and sit in the garden? It's so hot in here. Aunt Constance is taking me for a drive presently, and Mary's coming with us. Paul, can't you ride a bicycle? There's one of Addie's which you could have. No, my dear chap. It makes you so hot, and all that perspiring is such a dirty business." "Well, in that case," thought Van der Welcke, "I'll go on my own. But it's not particularly cheerful. If only Guy weren't working. I can't very well take him from his work to come cycling, so I'll go on my own. Lord, Lord, how boring everything and everybody is, without my boy. How that poor Addie is moping. No, I can't endure it. I can't do it. I can't go bicycling by myself. I'll ask Guy to come. It'll do him good. The boy is too healthy to be always sitting with a pile of books round him." Van der Welcke went upstairs, reflecting that Addie would not approve at all if he knew that his own father was taking Guy from his work to go bicycling, as he had often taken Addie himself in the past. "But Addie has so much method. He used to divide his time so splendidly between his work, his mother, and me," thought Van der Welcke. "Still, today I simply cannot go bicycling on my own, and so I'll just play the part of the tempter." He had reached the first story, and here too the windows on the passage were wide open, and the summer, fragrant and radiant, entered the gloomy old house, whose brown shadows vanished in patches of sunlight. The sunlight glided along the dark walls, the oak doors, the worn stairs, along the faded carpets and curtains, and through the open doors. And it was strange, but all this new summer, however much Van der Welcke had longed for it throughout the long dreary winter, the winter of wind and rain, now failed to cheer him, on the contrary, depressed him with inexplicable sadness. He now opened the door of Addie's study. Since Addie and Mathilde had moved to The Hague, the room had remained the same as regards furniture, but somehow dead. Only in the morning, Guy usually sat working at his table by the window, and Van der Welcke was sure to find him there. But he was not there, and the books and maps had obviously not been opened or looked at. "Where can the boy be?" thought Van der Welcke. "He can't still be in bed." The room did not look as if anyone had been there that morning. There were a couple of letters on Addie's writing table, where the maids always left any that arrived for him at the old address, so that he might find them when he came down, once or twice a week, for the brief visit to which everyone at home looks forward. Van der Welcke moodily closed the door. "I'd better see if he's still upstairs," he thought, going up the second flight. Since Guy had given up his bedroom to Maricha van Satsuma, he slept in a little dressing room. The door was open, the bed was made. "The fellow must have gone out already," thought Van der Welcke. "It's a dirty trick not to let me know. Well, I shall go by myself. I need some air." Angrily he went downstairs through the hall to the outhouse, where the bicycles were kept. Guy's was not there. "There, I said so. He's gone out and never even let me know. Oh, it's always like that. Those children are always selfish. We do everything for them when they've got no claim on us. And what sort of thanks do we receive? The boy knows that I'm fond of him, that I like cycling with him when Addie's not here, but he doesn't so much as think of looking for me and asking me to go with him. It's all egoism. It's always thinking of your own self. If there's any paying to be done, that's all right. That's what Uncle Henri's there for. But the least little thought for me, not a bit of it. That's the way it goes. I've lost Addie, and tried to find him again in another, and it's simply impossible and ridiculous." Still young and active, he slung himself on his bicycle, and for a minute or two enjoyed the motion of the handsome, glittering machine as it glided down the summer lanes. But very soon he began to think gloomily, "A motor car I should have liked to have. I'm not buying one because of those everlasting boys. Life is expensive enough as it is, and instead of guys thinking of me now and again. Ah, well, if you want to do good to others, you must just do it because it is good, for to expect the least bit of gratitude is all rot." No, cycling alone did not console him. His handsome, glittering, nickel-plated machine glided listlessly down the summer lanes, and he suddenly turned round. "That's enough for me, all by myself, without anybody or anything." And he rode back home slowly, put the machine away, and looked at the empty stand where Guy usually kept his machine. "Have you seen Guy?" asked Constance, meeting her husband in the hall. "He's out," said Van der Welcke, curtly and angrily. "He hasn't been working," she added. "I always look into Addie's study to see if Guy is at work. Addie asked me to." "No, he has not been working. He's out." "Yes, with his bicycle." "Then why didn't he ask you to go with him?" "I'm sure I don't know," said Van der Welcke angrily, shrugging his shoulders. Constance too did not think it friendly of Guy. What does it mean? She wondered to herself. He ought to have been working, but if he wanted to go cycling, he might really have let his uncle know. And her soul too became filled with melancholy, because young people were inevitably so ungrateful. But she said nothing to Van der Welcke, and they never knew that they often thought and felt alike, as in an imperceptible harmony of approaching old age that found only a negative expression. They so seldom quarrelled nowadays, at most exchanged a single irritable word, even though no deep sympathy had ever come to them. Constance went to her room to put on a hat. The carriage was ordered. She was going for a drive with the girls. She felt worried about poor Gerrit, who no longer took pleasure in anything. It will pass, she thought. We have all of us, in our time, been through a phase of melancholy. Adeline told me that Gerrit was in love with her Zela, but he doesn't appear to think about her. Oh, how I worry and worry about it all. About my poor boy, about Mathilde. Zela is bound to be attracted by her. Come, I need air in this fine weather, and yet this warm air oppresses me. The summer is always oppressive in our country. The weather in our country is always becoming something. It never has become anything, like the weather in the south. It is becoming, always becoming something. It's sultry now. The sun is scorching. We're sure to have a storm this evening. She now left her room, ready, and thought, Addie is coming to lunch today. It's his day, and oh, how I always long for that day. Last time he had to answer some letters, and ran for ink for his writing table. I'll just see if everything is in order now. She entered the room that used to be Addie's study. Yes, the ink's there, she told herself with a glance at the writing table. How uncosy, how cold the room looks, with nothing but the old furniture, the old man's furniture. There are letters for Addie again. The poor boy never has any rest. Casually she took a step towards the table and was struck by the appearance of the letters. What is that? She thought. The letters, there were 3 of them, were without stamps or postmarks. It was this that had struck her. Bills? She wondered for a moment. Then she shivered and began to tremble so violently that she dropped into Addie's chair. She had recognized Guy's hand. There were 3 letters. One was addressed to herself and her husband, to Uncle Henri and Aunt Constance, the second to Addie, the third to Mamma. She sat distraught, staring at the 3 letters vacantly, without putting out her hand. A cloud of white squares seemed to whirl about her. It was as if the envelopes were flying round in a circle before her eyes, and she felt suddenly faint. What is it? What does it mean? She asked herself aloud. She looked at Guy's work table. The books were there, neatly arranged on the big atlases. She got up and trembled so violently that she felt herself sinking away into an abyss. She rang the bell. The door was open. She heard the maid on the stairs. Troucher. Yes, ma'am. Troucher, I'm here, in Mr. Addie's study. What is it, ma'am? Call your master at once. But how pale you look, ma'am. What is it, ma'am? Nothing, Troucher. Call the master at once. Aren't you well? Yes, only call the master. The maid went away in dismay. The stairs creaked under her hurried tread. Constance had sunk back into the chair again and sat waiting. Downstairs the piano sounded under Paul's fingers, and she followed the tune, Sigmund's love song. "He plays well, he plays well," she thought. She was half fainting. The white squares still surrounded her because of the 3 letters there on the table. She now heard a footstep on the stairs. She followed the creaking as it came nearer. It was her husband, at last. "What's the matter, Constance?" Her throat would not allow a word to pass. She merely pointed to the table. "Well, what is it? Letters? For Addie?" She continued to point. He looked, recognized Guy's hand. He glanced at her. She said nothing. He now opened the letter to Uncle Henri and Aunt Constance. "Has the boy gone mad?" Constance looked up with a question in her eyes. Every kind of thought raced through her, so rapidly that she could not follow them. And yet she seemed to see one thought flash across them, slantwise. Had 3 letters from Alex been lying there? From Alex, who was always so much obsessed by the vision of terror and blood that had shocked his young imagination, she would have feared the worst. Van der Welcke handed her the letter without a word. She read it greedily. Guy wrote briefly, wrote difficult, sincere words of gratitude. Oh, it was not want of gratitude to Uncle Henri and Aunt Constance that had made him go without taking leave of all who were dear to him. He was not ungrateful to Addie, but it was just because, under all his cheerfulness, he had felt himself quietly growing sad under all their kindness, while he found it impossible to go on working. And of course he knew that if he had said to Addie, "I can't work at books. What I want very vaguely, and I don't know how, is to make my own way," Addie would have let him go, because Addie understood everybody and everything so well. But it was just this, the conversations, the leave-takings that he feared, because within him there was so much inert weakness, because he could never have gone if he had had to speak, if he had had to take leave, and that was why he was going away like this, with his bicycle and his bit of pocket money. "But the boy's mad," cried Van der Welcke, "to clear out like this at his age, with no money, and just his bicycle. The boy's mad. I must telegraph to Addie at once." "He will be out, and on his way to us. This is his day for coming down." "Which train does he come by?" "The 11:30 as a rule." The girls, Gerrit and Mary, came in with their hats on. "Are you coming, Aunt? The carriage is there." "The carriage? When we've been for our drive, we can fetch Addie from the station," said Mary. Constance burst into sobs. Auntie, what's the matter?" Van der Welcke left the room, taking the letter for Addie with him. "How are we to tell her?" he thought to himself. Constance, upstairs, had an attack of nerves. She sobbed as violently, felt as miserable in the depths of her being, as if it had been her own child that had left the paternal house, for good. End of chapter 25. Chapter 26 of Dr. Adriaan by Louis Couperus. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. In the midst of the sunshine on that summer day, a spirit of melancholy descended upon the whole of the big house, and set the nerves of all the inmates tingling. Addie had read Guy's letter, had left at once, for Rotterdam. Downstairs in the morning room, Adeline sobbed without ceasing, and from the sunlit conservatory, the old grandmother stared at her through the vista of the rooms, because she did not understand. Adeline lay sobbing in Emilie's arms. Marie and Paul were with her too. Upstairs, Adelaide and Mary remained with Constance. Browse appeared at the door. "What has happened?" he asked in a whisper. Van der Welcke seized him by the arm, took him into the garden. Klaasje lay half asleep against the thick trunk of a beech, with Jack nestling in her little skirts, both tired with playing. The child was humming a tune, looking up at the sky, dreaming away amid all the gold that rained down upon her between the leaves like glittering coins. "What has happened?" Browse asked again. But Van der Welcke could not speak. His throat refused to let the words through. "Good morning, Uncle Browse," cried Klaasje dreamily. "Look, Uncle Browse, I'm very rich. It's raining golden sovereigns over me. Out of the beech tree, out of the beech tree, out of the beech tree, golden sovereigns are raining over Klaasje," she hummed rhythmically. "Hans," asked Browse, "what's the matter, old fellow?" "It's that idiot of a Guy," said Van der Welcke at last hoarsely. "I was looking for him this morning. Couldn't find him anywhere. His bicycle was gone. He has cleared out. He left 3 letters behind him, for his mother, for Addie and for us. He writes that he can't work at books, that he wants to try his own way. I've read all the letters. He tells Addie that he feels he must stand alone, that he must stand alone if he's to do any good, that in this house—" Van der Welcke gave a sob. "Well, he feels himself growing flabby because there's too much affection, too much leniency for him. That's the sort of thing he writes. Who would have thought the boy was so silly? He writes that he won't do any good if he stays here, that he wants to go and face the world. A boy of his age. The most ridiculous idea I've ever heard of." "The boy may be right," said Browse very gently. But Van der Welcke was not listening. "I shall miss him," he confessed. "I miss him now. He was my favourite, among them all. He consoled me for the loss of Addie. I loved him as my own son. So did Constance." Browse was silent. "Life is a damned rotten encumbrance," said Van der Welcke explosively. "We do everything for those children. We do everything for that boy, and all of a sudden he goes away. Instead of staying with us, causes us sorrow, breaks his poor mother's heart. He writes about America. Addie went straight to the station to make enquiries. He was going on to Rotterdam. Addie never has a moment's peace. He was looking tired as it was, tired and sad, and instead of having a day's rest, with us, with all of us. I wanted to go with him, but he said he preferred to go alone. Why not have told Addie that he would rather do something else than go into the post office? God, we'd have been glad enough to help him. Addie, does everything, does every blessed thing for the children. Oh, Browse, it's as if a son of my own had run away in a fit of madness. Addie has gone to Rotterdam. It was Addie's idea, Rotterdam. But Guy can just as well have gone to Antwerp, to Le Havre, to God knows where. He hadn't much money with him. What will he do? What were his plans?" The sunny summer day passed gloomily. Just a telegram from Addie, coming tomorrow, without any further explanation. Constance had found the strength to go to Adeline in her room. The girls were overcome with a silent stupefaction at the thought that Guy, their cheerful Guy, kept so much hidden under his light-heartedness. A deeper dissatisfaction with life, vague and unclear to all of them who were so happy to be with Uncle Henri and Aunt Constance in what had so long been their family house, since they had been quite small children. And when Alex arrived in the evening from Amsterdam, he too could not understand why Guy had felt a need so suddenly to go away from all of them without taking leave, with that queer idea of making his way in the world alone. On the contrary, he, Alex, valued in the highest degree all that Uncle, Aunt and Addie did for him. Without them he would never have made any headway in the world, and he was making headway at last, he thought. He was now working methodically at Amsterdam, and almost methodically making his melancholy yield ground. It was as though Addie inspired him with the love of work and the love of life, wooing to life in him the strength to become a normal member of society. Oh, he felt it so clearly. After every talk with Addie, he felt it once more, felt strength enough to stay 1 week in Amsterdam, to work, to live, to see the dreaded life which his father had escaped by suicide come daily closer and closer, nearer and nearer, like a ghostly vista, at first viewed anxiously and darkly, but later entered, walked into, inevitably, until all the ghostliness of it was close around him. And when he thought of his father, and always saw him lying in a pool of blood, with his mother's body flung across the corpse in all terror of despair, then at the same time he would think of Addie and reflect that life, no doubt, would not be gay, but that nevertheless it need not always hark back out of black spectral dread to his youth, because Addie spoke of being strong and becoming a man gradually, and Guy had gone, had evaded just that beneficial strengthening influence of Addie. No, Alex could not understand it, and that evening he remained sitting gloomily between his sisters, not knowing what he could say to comfort his mother. The next day was Sunday, and if he did not see Addie on Sunday, he knew that the following week would not be a good one for him in Amsterdam, would be a bad black week. And it was only Grandmamma and Ernst and Clasher who did not feel oppressed by the sombre, sudden, incomprehensible and unexpected events which the others were all trying to understand and explain. To them the summer day had been all sunlight, and the gloom had passed unperceived by them. Next morning Addie returned. Constance, who was quite unstrung, had been 2 and 3 times to the station in vain. At last she saw him. "You didn't find him?" she asked with conviction. "Yes, I did." "What? You found him? How? How is it possible?" "I had an idea that he couldn't go farther than Rotterdam. He hadn't much money on him. I hunted and hunted until I found him." "And you haven't brought him back with you?" "No, I let him go." "You let him go?" "I think it's best. He was very anxious to go. He was angry at my finding him. I talked to him for a long time. He said that he wished to be under no more obligations, fond though he was of us, grateful though he felt." Constance, trembling, had taken Addie's arm. They went home on foot. The road lay in a bath of summer under the trees. He spoke sensibly. He had a vague idea of working his passage on a steamer as a sailor or stoker. I took a ticket for him. He will write to us regularly. I told him that Mr. Browse, if he liked, could certainly give him some introductions in New York. He said he would see. He showed a certain decision, as if he were doing violence to something in his own character. It was rather strange. I thought I ought not to compel him to come back. He told me that he was certain of not passing his examination, and that this was what got on his mind and upset him, that he couldn't concentrate on his books, that he would now look after himself. There was a boat going to London. I gave him some money. It's better this way, Mamma. Let him stand on his own legs. Here, the way things were going, he might have gone drudging on. She wept distractedly. We shall miss him so. He was the life of the house. Papa will miss him badly. Oh, it is terrible. Poor Adeline. They reached home. Let me speak to Aunt Adeline first. My dear, make everything right. Oh, put it so that Aunt thinks it's right and accepts it. You can do everything, dear. No, Mamma, I can't do everything. You can do everything. You can. What should we have done without you? Now that you have found him and talked to him and made things smooth for him, perhaps everything will be all right for him. If you hadn't found him, how did you know that he had gone to Rotterdam? I felt almost sure of it, Mummy, but I didn't know anything for certain. I might have been mistaken. You look so tired. I've had a tiring day. Addie, to people outside, to the family, we will say that he has gone to America, a sudden idea, with introductions from Mr. Browse. My dear, how can you talk of it so calmly? Mummy, perhaps it's better as it is, for him. He was doing no good here. He wasn't working, and he was getting enervated in the midst of all his relations. He has developed a sudden energy. It would be a pity to stifle it. I simply could not bring myself to do that. My boy, do you tell your aunt? Tell Papa too. Tell all of them. Tell his sisters and Alex. I can't tell them. I should only cry. I'm going upstairs to my room. You tell them, won't you? You'll make it appear as if it's all right, as if it's quite natural, as if it's all for the best. Yes, Mummy dear, you go upstairs. I'll tell it them. I'll tell all of them. End of chapter 26. Chapter 27 of Dr. Adriaan by Louis Couperus. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The oppressive, sultry, rainless summer days followed one after the other, and the night also waited in oppressive expectation of oppressive things, which were to happen and never happened, as though what we expected to happen immediately withdrew farther, and only hung over houses and people with heavy stormy skies of blazing morning blue, until great grey-white clouds blew up from a mysterious cloudland and drifted past on high. Only on the more distant horizons was there any lightning, and that came soundlessly later in the day. The threat of a thunderstorm drove past. The foliage became scorched in the dust of advancing summer, and faded with the approach of decay, and there was almost a sort of longing for autumn and for purple death in autumnal storms. A nature tired with heavy trailing summer life that had never finally become anything and was always becoming something, never flashing forth in bright achievement of summer, but dragging her incompleteness from heavy day to heavy day under the heavy immensity of skies, towards the later bursting delights of autumn. Heavy wind, heavy rain, followed by the heavy death struggle and unwillingness to die of that which had never been the glory of the sun, and yet left no golden memory behind. Often in those oppressive nights Maricha von Satzuma could not get to sleep, or else woke up with a sudden start. She had been dreaming that she was falling down an abyss, or gliding down a staircase, or bumping her head against the ceiling like a giant bluebottle. Then she would get up, draw the curtains, and look out at the heavy night of trees, grey with darkness melting into darkness. The road beyond the house was grey, like an ashen path. The oak and beeches showed grey, their leafy tops unruffled by the wind. In the front garden the dust-covered standard roses stood erect as pikes, and the roses drooped from them, grey and with the tired, pining attitude of heavy flowers hanging from limp stalks. All was grey and silent. Only, in the very far distance, a dog barked, and the bedroom, still dark with the night light had gone out, began to stifle Maricha so much that she softly opened the door and went through the attic, though Addie had forbidden her to wander about like this at night. She went carefully in noiseless slippers, pale in her nightdress, staring wide-eyed into the great indoor twilight. She passed the doors of the maids' bedrooms and down the first flight of stairs, stepping very lightly so that the stairs did not creak. Once on the staircase, she breathed more freely with relief at feeling something more spacious than the air of her room, the relief of unfettered movement, although the grey silence wove such strange cobwebs all around her, through which she walked down the endless passages. She now went past Uncle's door, Aunt's door, Mamma's door, the girls' doors, past Addie's and Mathilde's empty rooms, and she felt that she was very much in love with Addie, silently and without desire, and was always thinking of him, even though she did not always do as he told her, because she simply could not remain in her room, and longed even for the outdoor air, to feel it blowing through the filmy tissues that covered her young body. And however much without desire, because Addie remained to her the utterly unattainable, yet there blossomed up in her a nervous passion, like some strange flower or orchid or lily, seen in a waking dream, a blameless girl's dream of love, of soft, wistful lying in each other's arms, and feeling the pressure of breast against breast, or mouth against mouth, and ecstatic thrills through all one's body. Then Maricha would long for Addie, so that he might lay his hand upon her head. No more, that was enough for her, because she was also very fond of him, of his voice, and his glance and his speech, of his care, of his sympathy, of everything abstract that came from him to her. She knew that, on his side, it was no more than gentle interest, but it was enough for her. She lived upon little like a bloodless lily, her body and soul needing no excess. She well knew at the moment that she was doing what she should not, wandering like that through the house, half awake, half asleep, because it was so fresh and cool to walk about like that, half naked. The night grew grey with dusk, and there were deeper shadows in the corners. But she was not afraid. After she had once talked to Addie about the house, and he had explained to her that, if there was anything of the past hovering about it, it could not be malign or angry, but rather well disposed and on the alert, in case it could be of use. He spoke to nobody but her like this. She knew that, and it gave her a deep love for him, especially because he had said it so very simply, and without any sort of exaggeration, as though it were the very simplest thing that he could have wished to say. Nor did he speak like that often. Once or twice at most he had spoken so, but it had reassured her greatly, ever since she had been frightened into fainting on the little staircase, all because of a sudden shadow which she thought that she saw, and yet did not know if she really saw. She was now going down by that same little back staircase, almost longing to see a shadow, and always thinking of Addie, but she saw nothing. White and as though walking in her sleep, she felt her way down the narrow little stairs. They creaked slightly. She next opened a door, leading into the long hall, which was like that of an old castle, so fine with its old wainscoting. The long Devonshire carpet was paled by many years' traffic of feet. The front door seemed to vanish in the grey vista. On the oak cabinet, the delft jars gleamed dimly. She walked in a waking dream on her noiseless slippers, and now opened the door of the morning room, all dark, with the blinds down. She was very white now in the darkness, and could see her own whiteness, and she looked through the drawing-room into the conservatory, where Granny was always accustomed to sit. The conservatory windows showed faintly like transparent greynesses, and behind them, in the dawning light of very early morning, something of the dusk of the garden melted away. In the very early light it was all ash, the conservatory full of fading ash, and the garden full of ash. Not an outline was visible as yet, and she gazed, and thought it so strange, and yet, perhaps, not so very strange, that such outlines as did stand out in the conservatory against the grey windows were motionless as the outlines of two dark shadows, sitting each at a window, as it were an old man and an old woman, looking out at the birth of morning, which, very far in the distance, gave just a reflection of paler twilight. Maricha now closed her eyes for an instant, then raised her lids again, and stared at the conservatory, and it was always that, the outline of the dark brooding shadows, so very similar to unconsciousness, as if she were looking through atmosphere within atmosphere, invisible at other hours than those of the greyness of the ending night and the beginning of the morning melancholy. The two irrealities remained grey against grey, and suddenly Maricha felt very cold and shivered, half naked as she was. And, in her shivering, it seemed to her that very quickly the shadows themselves shivered, as with the start of surprise, and disappeared because she had dared to stare at them. Nothing was outlined any more against the conservatory windows. Only the morning between the trees grew paler. There was even a streak of white. Maricha was cold. She left the room, forgot to shut the door after her, and going down the passage, made for the little back staircase, and here also forgot to shut the door. Up she crept, shivering with the noiseless tread of the soft slippers, across the attic now, and she stole into bed, quite cooled, and, after just thinking about what she had seen dimly outlined, perhaps, against the grey conservatory windows, she fell asleep peacefully and dozed until late in the morning, peacefully and like a cold virgin now, with the bedclothes drawn up to her chin. End of chapter 27. Chapter 28 of Dr. Adriaan by Louis Couperus. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Addie was out in the afternoon when Mathilde opened Constance's telegram. "Please come see Emilie." "There's always something," Mathilde grumbled to herself. "Addie is physician in ordinary to his relations. When it's not Clasha, it's Adeline, or Mary, or Emilie. There's always something. What can be the matter with her now? He's only just been home. Oh, of course, she's always ill in the summer. I expect it's the same as last year." She had an angry impulse to tear up the telegram and say nothing to Addie, to tell him later that it must have gone astray. She did not destroy it, however, but laid it on the table where he would see it, and then went out to the tennis club. As a rule, she took the steam tram and alighted at the Wittebrug. This time she ran against Erzela with his racket in his hand in the Bezoudenhout. "I was waiting for you," he said. "How nice of you. Let's take the steam tram. Why not walk?" They stepped out along the Hertenkamp. "Is anything the matter?" he asked. "Why? You look so preoccupied." "Oh, it's nothing. You're out of humour. Need I say they want Addie again at home? Who's ill this time?" "Emilie." "Mrs. Van Raven?" "Yes, she calls herself Mrs. Van Nagel now. I know. She's the one who ran away with her brother years ago. There was rather a scandal about that, wasn't there? People didn't exactly know. I don't like her. She's ill every summer. Then she becomes funny, and then she has to see my husband, of course. Hence the telegram for Mamma. The other day, Mrs. van der Welcke saw... Saw what? That I was holding your hand. What about it? You're a friend. We've known each other for years, since we were quite young. Do you know, Mamma warned me against you. Against me? She was afraid that... What? You would fall in love with me. I am in love with you. Now, Johann, you're not to say that. You know, I always have been. You were in love with Gerrit. For a minute only. With you I have always been in love. Long ago, at our Cinderella dances. In love. I've always loved you. You must not talk like that. I love my husband. Yes, I know you do, but he doesn't make you happy." She was silent. She did not wish to go on and say that she felt Addie so far above her, unattained and incomprehensible, that everything was coming to escape her, that her love was escaping her, that she felt herself sinking slowly, slowly, in a vague abyss, that it was only the children who made her find Addie again, every day for a moment. She was silent, but there were tears in her eyes. Her healthy temperament, now slightly unnerved, had a need of much happiness for itself, even as a healthy plant needs much air and much water, and does not know what it means to pine. The melancholy that sometimes overcame her was not native to her. "Let's take the tram," she said. "I feel tired." "It's better for you to walk," he said. His voice was authoritative, and she allowed herself to be coerced. It was a hot afternoon, and she dragged herself along mechanically beside him, both carrying their own rackets. Mamma's quite right, Johann, she said abruptly. It won't do for us to see each other so often, for me to talk to you so intimately. And why not, if you feel unhappy, if you want to unburden yourself to me? No, it doesn't do. Come, let's take the tram. We shall be too late for our tennis. He looked out mechanically for the tram. They were at the corner of the Waalsdorp road, and he said, Look here, walk a little way with me. I don't feel like tennis, do you? She let herself be dragged along and turned down the lonely green road. She seemed to surrender feebly to his wishes, and she became aware that she was in a profound state of melancholy, a hesitation of not knowing things, of wavering, of feeling unhappy. Everything could have been so different, she said, almost crying. What do you mean? When? If Addie. If he what? I don't know, she said. I'm tired of thinking about it. It is not his fault. No, it's your fault. My fault? Yes, nothing would keep you from marrying him, and I loved you. You? But you never asked me. But you knew that I loved you. Yes, everything could have been different. Oh, everything could have been so very different. She suddenly began to cry. Tilly! Oh, she said, sobbing. Don't let us talk like this. Let's go to the tennis club. No, I don't want to. She turned. Tilly! No, I won't go any farther. I'm going to the club. It'll distract me. To play tennis. She turned back. He followed her. Tilly, you're so unstrung. If you were a little calmer, I should tell you. What? That I can't bear to see you unhappy. Oh, I love you. I love you. Let us go away. Together. Go away? Where? With each other. I love you. I love you. I have always loved you. She stopped with a start. You're mad. Why? To suggest such a thing, she said with a scornful laugh. You're mad. You think that I want to be unhappy all your life? That I should consent to run away with you? I love my husband and my children. Do you imagine? Yes, he said. It was mad of me to suggest it. You love your husband, not me. You never allow me anything. Not anything. Nothing. At all? She asked scornfully. Nothing that counts, he retorted, hoarsely, roughly. She shrugged her shoulders. You men always want that. Our happiness does not always consist of that. No, but if you loved me entirely. Johann, she cried. They crossed the bridge and entered the woods. If you ever dare speak to me like that again. Very well, I won't. But you're always doing it. We'd better not see each other at all. Not see each other? No, I won't have that, he said. I won't have that either. And if I insist? Even so. You don't make me any happier by talking like that. You make me even unhappier than I am. Oh, Tilly, I can't bear to see you unhappy. What are we to do? What are we to do? I don't know, she said in a dead voice. You don't care for me? Not in that way. Why shouldn't we be friends? That's nonsense. Friendship between a man and a woman. That's one of those notions which you picked up, I dare say, at Driebergen, among neurotic people. Between a man and a woman there's only yearning. I want you, and I'm in hell because I haven't got you. Yes, it's always that, she said, and she thought of Addie. Oh, if you would only go with me, out of this. Would that make me happy? I should live for you entirely. I have a little money. That would make me happy, would it? To leave my husband, to leave my children. Your husband, your children, but I should be there. Yes, but you don't care for me. Not like that. All the same, you would become happy. You never found happiness in your husband, you say so yourself, because you don't understand him. You would understand me. She began to cry again. Oh, she said, don't go on talking like that. Do you care for me, Tilly? Do you care for me? Yes, Johann, I do care for you. Well, She stood still. "Listen," she said, looking him straight in the eyes. "I care for you." Her voice sounded loving in spite of herself. "I care for you, very much indeed. At this moment, perhaps even more than for Addie. I'm not quite sure. A time may come, when I shall care for you even more, certainly more than for Addie." "Oh," he cried. "But then—" "Don't speak," she said. "Listen to me. What you're asking of me, I refuse." "Why?" "Because I'm an honest woman. Because I am naturally an honest woman. Because I always mean to be an honest woman. I could never do what you ask me to. Because, even if I had to say goodbye to my husband, I should never be willing to say goodbye to my children." "You love your children better." "Better? I love them in a way which a man like you simply cannot understand." "Tilly!
Be quiet. There are people coming. Be quiet."
"Oh, Tilly, what then?"
"I don't know,"
she said dully.
"Oh, come along to the club. We'll play some tennis."
She quickened her pace. He followed her, lurching like a drunken man. Translator's note. The steam tram, running from The Hague to Scheveningen, through the dunes, as opposed to the electric tram, running through the Scheveningen woods. End of chapter 28. Chapter 29 of Dr. Adriaan by Louis Couperus. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. When Addie found the telegram, he at once took the train to Driebergen. It was evening when he arrived. "What's the matter with Emilie?" he asked his mother.
"She's crying all day long,"
said Constance.
"It's just like last year."
He went straight upstairs to Emilie's room and found her sobbing in Adeline's arms.
"I'm at my wits' ends what to do with her," said Adeline. "Leave me alone with her for a moment, Aunt," whispered Addie. "Here," feeling in his pocket. "Here's a letter from Guy, posted in New York. You'll see that he has found work, thanks to Mr. Brow's introduction."
Adeline left the room. Emilie went on sobbing. She flung herself on the floor with her face against a chair, and her hair dishevelled, her thin hands grasping the chair.
"Addie," she cried. "Addie, is that you?"
"Yes, Emilie."
"Oh, it's suffocating me. It's suffocating me. Let me tell you about it."
He sat down, and she came to him with the movement of an animal creeping towards him. She stammered incoherent words, but he understood them. He knew the words of old. He knew what she was saying. It had been the same thing last year, and the year before. At the beginning of each summer, there was some fit of madness which mastered her, a fit in which she lived all over again, through things that had happened in the years long ago.
"Oh, it was a terrible secret which she always carried about with her, which no one knew, which no one had ever known."
In the dark room with the closed sunblinds, the secret stifled her and had to be told, because it stifled her in her heart and throat.
"I must tell it you, Addie. It was during those last days, those terrible days in Paris. Edouard, my husband, was in Paris, and he had been threatening me. You remember, you must remember. I told you as much as that, didn't I? He had to come to look for me in Paris. He hated me, and he hated, oh, how he hated Henri. Henri, my poor brother, my brother. Addie, let me tell you everything. Whatever people may have thought, whatever people may have said, none of it is true. It's all false. He was my brother, my own brother, and I loved him as a brother, though perhaps too much, and he loved me as a sister, though perhaps too much. Oh, people are so wicked, so utterly wicked. They said, as for me, I would never speak. Oh, Addie, your parents, and you Your kindest and dearest of parents never asked me a question, but took me to live with them in their house, which has become my sanctuary, where I can lead my cloistered life. Oh, Addie, I shall be grateful for ever and ever to your dear parents, and to you. They never asked me anything. They have been like father and mother to me. I have been able to live under their roof, though my life has been nothing but remorse and pain. Oh, Addie, let me tell you everything. Henri was a clown in a circus. You know about that. And I made money by painting. We lived together. We were both of us happy. Then Edouard came. Oh, he was like an evil spirit. Oh, when I dream of him now, I dream of a devil. Addie, Edouard came, and it was he.
I know, Emilie, I know. The words burst from her in a scream.
It was he who murdered Henri.
Hush, Emilie.
Oh, I can't keep silent. I can't keep silent forever. It chokes me. Here.
She uttered loud, hysterical cries, twisting herself against the chair. Her eyes stared distractedly out of her face. Her hair hung loose about her cheeks. Her features were pale and distorted.
It was after an evening when he had been playing in the circus. And Edouard.
I know. Hush, Emilie.
He waited for him in the passage in front of the house where we lived. And he called him names. They quarrelled. Then he stabbed him with a knife.
Hush, Emilie, hush. But she screamed it out. Her screeches rang through the room. She wriggled like a madwoman against his knees. He stroked her dishevelled hair to quiet her.
Oh, your parents, your dear parents, Addie. They never asked me anything. They came and fetched me. Oh, Addie, that journey home with the coffin between us. Oh, those formalities at the frontiers. Oh, Addie, your dear parents, they saved me. I was mad at that time. Now it's all coming back to me. I can't keep it to myself any longer. You see, he waited for him. They began quarrelling about me, and suddenly they were like two wild animals. Henri rushed at him, and then Edouard stabbed him with his knife. The villain! He has been missing since then. I have never seen him again. Only at night, I see him, with his knife. Oh, Addie, help me.
He gripped her by the arms with all his might, and sought to control her, but she resisted. She was like a madwoman. In the sultry summer heat, she was overmastered by the day-long vision that loomed up regularly with the first balmy warmth of spring. She was like a madwoman. She saw everything before her eyes. She lived the past over again.
Nobody has ever known, Addie, except you.
Hush, Emilie, hush. He tried to look into her eyes, but they avoided his. She twisted and turned as though she were in the grasp of a ravisher. She dragged herself along the floor while his hand held her arms. Suddenly his eyes met hers, and he held and pierced them deeply with his grey-blue glance. She fell back helplessly against a chair. Her features, now relaxed, hung slackly like an old woman's. Her lips drooped. She lay huddled and moaning with a monotonous moan of pain. Then she began to shake her head up and down, grating the back of her head against the chair. "Get up, Emilie." She obeyed. Let him help her up, hung like a rag in his hands. She fell back on her bed with her eyes closed, and he rang the bell. It was Constance who entered. "We will undress her now, Mamma. She's much quieter. I'll ring for Aunt Adeline to help you." He rang again, and asked Troucher to go for Mrs. van Lowe, but as soon as Emilie felt the touch of Constance's fingers, she began to moan anew and opened her eyes.
"Oh, Auntie, you're a dear. You never asked me."
Perhaps it will be better to leave her now, Mamma," whispered Addie. Constance left the room, promising to remain within call with Adeline. Emilie lay on the bed, her eyes staring straight before her, as though she still beheld all the horror of the past, and she went on moaning in fear and pain.
Addie, it was Edward who murdered Henri. Oh, nobody knows. Uncle and Aunt never asked me. People at The Hague say that it was I who made Edward unhappy, that is why he has gone away, disappeared. Perhaps I did make him unhappy. I don't know. You see, I didn't know what I was doing when I married Edward. I thought it would be all right. I thought I cared for him. Shh, Addie, don't tell anybody, but I cared for Henri, for my brother only. I swear, it was all quite beautiful what he and I felt for each other. There was never anything between us, never anything to be ashamed of. But my life, Addie, my poor life, oh, my poor little life, was quite wrecked, because I did not know, because I felt so strangely, because I fought against the common things of life, against my marriage, against my husband, and because all that was stronger than what I tried to do, what I myself did not really know, nor Henri either.
The heartbroken lamentation over her life moaned away in plaintive words, and it was as though, after uttering herself, she sank into a dull vacancy, with her eyes wide open, staring through the room as if she still saw all the things of the past, as if they were now vanishing after she had uttered herself. And it was the same every year. Each time spring came round, the same strange, mysterious force compelled her to tell it right out, to tell all the sad secret of her piteous wreck and failure of a woman's life. She, a very small soul, crushed under too great a tragedy, under too great an affliction, something too strange which had crushed her, and yet not crushed her to death. She lived on. She had lived on for years, living her life devoid of all interest, and yet still young. Bonds seemed still to bind her body and soul to life, and there was nothing left for her except the pity of those who surrounded her, and a dull resignation, which only once in each year, as though roused by the warm torrents of spring or summer, burst forth into a thunder of storm. It gathered. She felt it threatening days beforehand, as though it were bursting within her brain. During those sleepless nights she lay with her head clasped in her hands, and it gathered. A fit of nerves, a violent attack of nerves, and she called for Addie, the only one who knew, and she told him again. And after she had told it and fallen asleep under his eyes, she woke a little calmer. Then, after days, after long, slow days, her quivering nerves became restful. She surrendered herself, and that dull resignation wove itself round her again. The summer beat hot and sultry upon her. The slow course of the monotonous days dragged her on and on. Nobody talked of it all, and then, one evening in the garden, she found herself recovered, feeling strange and resigned. Limp her hands, limp her arms, with poor Aunt Adeline beside her, quite cheered and receiving a short letter from Guy, while the girls and Aunt Constance put Granny to bed, and then Clasha, that great big girl who still always insisted on being taken to bed, and while Uncle Ernst wandered round the pond talking to himself, and while Paul had not shown himself for 3 days, locking himself in his room, in the villa over there, lower down. That was how she recovered, as if waking from a hideous dream. That was how she came to herself in the evening, sitting in the garden with Aunt Adeline, reading and rereading Guy's letter beside her. And a little further away sat Mr. Browse and Uncle Henri who could not get used to Guy's absence, and who fretted over it sometimes, with the tears standing wet in his eyes. End of chapter 29. Chapter 30 of Dr. Adriaan by Louis Couperus. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Addie returned to The Hague that evening, and seldom had he felt so heavy and listless, as if he knew nothing for himself. No, he knew nothing more for his poor self, as if he, as he grew older, daily lost more and more of the knowledge that is sacredly imparted for a man's own soul, like a far-lighting lamp casts its rays over the paths of his own destiny that lie dimly in the future. Though he knew for others so often and so surely, for himself he knew nothing nowadays, nothing. Once he had known himself to be a dual personality. Today he no longer knew which of the two he was. He felt like a prematurely old and decrepit young man. Prematurely old and decrepit because life had become too serious for him, too early, and opened out to him too early, so that he had fathomed it through and through. Prematurely old and decrepit because his own life later had not trembled in the pure balance of his own twin forces of soul. He had felt fettered to the one, and it drew him down, while the other had not the power to lift him up to the height of pure self-realization. He walked home from the station, late in the evening. He dragged himself along. His step was heavy and slow. Over the dark masses of the wood hung a sultry pearl-grey summer night. The houses in the Bezoudenhout faded away, white in the evening silence. Light rain clouds dreamed in the sky. It would doubtless rain tomorrow, and far behind them lurked the threatening summer storm. For the present, the evening sombreness drifted on, as though in hushed expectation. Everything was still, the trees, the houses, the clouds. There was hardly anyone about. A last tram came rumbling out of the distance from Scheveningen, and its bells seemed to ring through the space of the evening, very far behind him. He walked on, dragged himself along past the houses. He was tired out, as he was every time that he practiced hypnotism. In addition to this, it always broke his heart to leave Driebergen. How united he was with everybody and everything there. The house was his father's and his. The family was his mother's and his. As the child of his two parents, he felt at home there, in that great sombre house. But he no longer lived there, no longer worked there. In the crudely bright, small, motley painted house towards which he was wending, his wife awaited him, and he would find his children. Healthy children, a healthy wife. He had all that. What he had longed for in his anxiety at what he saw in his mother's family, he now possessed. A healthy wife and healthy children. How they both of them loved the children. How united they were, where the children were concerned. All their difference arose from a spiritual misunderstanding, because at first they had not known. No? Did he know now? Did he know that he ought never to have taken a wife like Mathilde? Did he not know that it was his fault? There was nothing else for him to do than to continue the sacrifice all his life long. But the sacrifice was very heavy, living and working in contradiction to his impulses, in a sphere that was not his. It was this that made him ill and prematurely old. He saw no future before him. The sacrifice was killing something deep down in himself. He felt a sudden rebellion. It was not a man's business to sacrifice himself like that. What was done was done. Mathilde must accommodate herself somehow. He would tell her that it wouldn't do, that The Hague was killing him, that he must go back to the house out there, to the village, to the district where he was of use and able to work. She would have to go with him. But he saw her as a sacrificial victim, offered up for a faith which she did not share because of his mistake in life. No, he could never do it, could never tell her that the Hague was killing him, that she must accommodate herself and make the best of things. It was for him to make the best of things. If he wished to remain in any sense just, he must continue to sacrifice himself, though it wore him to death. How sombre and joyless it all was! How grey it all was, far and wide around him, like the very night that hung pearl-white close by, and, farther away, dug itself into abysses of threatening darkness. As he drew nearer home, his feet lagged more heavily, and suddenly, before turning down the street in which he lived, he dropped onto a bench and remained sitting as though paralysed, with his head in his hand. How hard and heavy it was for him to have to go back like that to his own house. Oh, to remain sitting, just sitting like that until he had attained certain knowledge. He closed his eyes. He felt himself conquered, overcome. Suddenly, as in a dream, voices struck upon his ear, and he seemed to recognize the voices. He rose mechanically and passed the houses along the silent pavement, saw approaching the dark figures of two people walking slowly, a man and a woman. Their voices sounded clearly, though he could not catch the words. He recognized the leisurely forms. It was Johann Erzähler and Mathilde. They did not see him. They walked on very slowly, and Addie followed behind them. Johann seemed to be persistently pleading. Mathilde seemed to be refusing something. Addie's heart beat fearfully as he followed after them, and a jealousy suddenly flared up amid his dull dejection. Was she not his wife? Was she not his wife? And why, lately, was she always looking for Johann, and he for her? Was it not always so? Always these tennis parties together? Always meeting at friends' houses where he, Addie, never went? Where were they coming from now? Where had they been? Was he bringing her home? How intimate their conversation sounded. How sad almost. Had they grown fond of each other in a dangerous, increasing friendship? He followed them unobserved, almost glad to have surprised them, suspicious in his jealous grief. Did he not still love his wife, notwithstanding their deep-seated differences? He slackened his pace and followed very slowly. After his first access of jealousy, he seemed rather to feel a certain curiosity, to observe in silence, to make a diagnosis. His nature got the upper hand of him, the nature of one who is born to heal, and who, before healing, diagnoses the disease. Yes, jealousy still smouldered within him, but he felt even more distinctly the craving for knowledge. Did he not still love Mathilde? Ah, but was she indispensable to his life? That suddenly became clear to him. Indispensable to his life she was not. His children, yes, they belonged to all of them yonder in the old house, the old family house. She, his wife, did not. His children were indispensable to his life. He felt that clearly. Mathilde was not. For Mathilde, as he now walked behind her and Johann, he felt only the curiosity to analyse and classify the nature of the disease. Nothing but that. Even the jealousy died away in him, the child of his jealous parents. He continued to follow them. He saw Erzähler put his arm through Mathilde's. He now quickened his pace slightly. His heels rang on the pavement through the night air, regularly, faster than before. The two in front looked round. They gave a start. He caught them up. "I seem to recognize you in the distance," he said, calmly and naturally, while they were unable to speak, and Erzähler withdrew his arm. "I've come from the station." "I didn't expect you till tomorrow," said Mathilde, faintly, in spite of herself. "I finished earlier. Emilie is much more peaceful. How are the children?
All right.
Where have you been this evening?
I went and had tea at Johann's sister's. Johann was seeing me home.
But now that Van der Welcke's here to see you home, said Erzähler. Not at all, replied Addie. Come a little way farther. They walked on, Mathilde between the two men. Addie talked conventionally. They hardly answered. Meanwhile he observed them. His curiosity roused him, gave him a sudden new interest, as though he was treating a case of serious illness.
I'll say goodbye here,
said Erzähler as they turned down the side street. They both shook hands with him and walked home more silently, suddenly dragging their feet. Addie felt in his pocket for the key. It's late, he said mechanically.
Getting on for 12,
replied Mathilde dully. He saw that her eyes were red with weeping. He said nothing. They went upstairs without speaking. On reaching the nursery, they both crept in for a moment on tiptoe and looked into the little cots. The nurse was sleeping in the next room with the door open between. They exchanged a smile because the babies were sleeping so prettily. Then they went to Mathilde's bedroom. Once they had crossed the threshold, it seemed to him as if they were strangers.
I'm tired,
said Mathilde. So am I, said Addie. He kissed her, left her, and went to his own bedroom. Through the closed door he could follow her movements, heard her undressing, heard the rustle of her clothes. He sank into a chair and stared straight in front of him. I know, he thought, with his eyes very wide. She loves him, and he loves her. I no longer love her. She has never been indispensable to my existence. I made a mistake. I did not know for myself. He did not sleep that night. Next morning early he said to Mathilde, Tilly, I want to talk to you.
What about?
About ourselves. She raised her eyebrows impatiently.
What for? She asked. We have had that sort of talk so often. It leads to nothing. It tires me.
Yes, you're looking tired and ill. You're not happy.
Oh, never mind my happiness.
But what else did we come here for, Tilly, except your happiness?
That's true, she said without interest. You did it for my sake. It was nice of you.
But it did no good.
No, it did no good, and it would be better.
What?
For you to go back to Driebergen, Addie.
I agree, he said gently. She started.
What do you mean?
I was thinking the same thing.
What?
That I ought to go back to Driebergen. She looked at him in surprise.
And I?
She asked. You remain here with the children.
I don't understand.
You stay in The Hague, you and the children.
And you?
I'll go down there.
I don't understand,
she repeated. I mean what I say, Tilly, he said. It's better.
What?
That we should separate.
Separate?
Perhaps, for a longer or shorter period. She stared at him.
Do you want a divorce?
I think so. She continued to stare at him and choke down her tears.
Addie, do you no longer love me?
No, he said gently. She looked deep in his eyes, affronted.
What do you mean?
That I don't love you any longer, enough to live with you. I beg your pardon, Tilly, if I have spoilt your life, if I have shattered your life. I have spoilt and shattered it. I beg your pardon, if you can forgive me.
Only a little while ago, you told me that you cared for me.
I thought so at the time. It seemed to mean so much to me.
And now?
Now I don't. She rebelled with injured pride.
Then why did you ask me to marry you?
Yes, that was just it.
Just what?
The mistake. Tell me, do you still love me?
No,
she said proudly. So you see, it's better.
That we should be divorced.
Don't you think so yourself?
And the children?
She asked. That's my punishment, he said gently. They will remain with you.
You entrust them to me?
I do.
Addie,
she cried with a sob. You still love me a little, Tilly." She only sobbed. "But not so much as you did," he assured her. "You are in love with Ed Saylor."
"Ed Saylor?"
"Yes."
"He's a friend."
"He may become more. Later," he forced himself to say, uncleansed as yet of jealousy, because she was still his wife.
"Addie," she said, "I am to blame. If I could only have got accustomed to things, like all of you, at Driebergen, I should have been happy."
"Yes, but it's not your fault that you couldn't."
"I don't want a divorce," she said.
"Why not?"
"For my sake, and the children's."
"The children's?"
"For their sake especially. No, Addie, I don't want it, unless—"
"What?"
"Unless you want it, for your own sake, to be free, to marry somebody else."
"No."
"Then I don't want it either, if you assure me."
"I do assure you."
"Then I don't want it either."
"And Ed Saylor?"
"No,"
she said, shaking her head.
"It's not as people say."
"What do they say?"
"That he is my lover. He's not that."
"I never supposed he was."
"I value his friendship, but I could not be his wife."
"Why not?"
"Because I am your wife."
"Do you feel that?"
"Always."
"My poor child," he said, in spite of himself.
"Why do you pity me?"
she asked proudly. "Because I've done you a wrong, because I'm unable to atone."
"You've done me no wrong. We loved each other very much, then. At that time, I thought I understood you. Now, I no longer understand you. You breathe too rarefied an air for me."
"No, it isn't that, but—"
"What?"
"Nothing. So, Tilly, you don't want us to be divorced?" She looked at him anxiously.
"No,"
she entreated. "Well, dear, then we won't be," he said gently. "Only, our present life is no life at all, so it will be better if—"
"If what?"
"If I don't stay with you, if I go away."
"And I?"
"You remain here in this house, where everything is as you like it. You stay with our children."
Our children,"
she stammered. "Perhaps later."
"What?"
"Because of our children, we shall come together again, when all misunderstanding has disappeared."
"I don't follow you."
"Perhaps you will later, but perhaps also you will become so fond of Ed Saylor that—" She shook her head, stared before her. "We never know," said Addie gently.
"No,"
she said pensively.
"I know nothing. Nothing now. I used to think that you knew everything."
"I do sometimes know things. For others. I have not known for myself."
"And now?"
"Now I know better, for you."
"For me?"
"Yes, now I know, Tilly, that it is better for you, that I should leave you."
"For good?"
"Perhaps. Perhaps for a long time. Only—"
"And the children? Won't you be longing for them?"
It was more than he could bear, and he said nothing, only nodded yes. Then he said, "But they will be all right, with you, Tilly." It was more than she could bear either. She fell into a chair, sobbing. "Don't be unhappy, Tilly," he said. "We must make a change. If we remain as we are, we shall end by hating each other. Don't be unhappy about parting, when you reflect that it is really out of the question for us to remain together."
"You are right,"
she said coldly.
"So—"
"You will stay here. You will live here. That is, if you like."
"And you?"
"I shall go home." She felt her jealousy of all of them out there. "Yes," he said gently.
"If you don't love me," she burst out, "they will not need to console you long."
"I shall feel regret, because I have spoilt your life, and because I shan't see the children any more."
"Spoilt my life," she said proudly. "You have not done that."
He did not answer.
"The children," she continued. "Why should you not see them when you want to?"
"Would you allow that?"
"Allow it? They are your children. I have nothing to say in the matter. In fact—"
"In fact?"
"I should not think it right if you did not see them often."
"Then I shall come."
"Of course, but to go on living here would be too expensive."
"No, not at all. I shall want nothing, out there. Whatever I make is yours." I can't accept it. Yes, you can. For the children. It is better, Tilly, that everything should remain as it is.
Very well,
she consented.
Only, Addie, it's not a solution.
There can be no solution until you know that you care enough for Johanna at Sailor.
No, I don't.
That you care enough for Johanna at Sailor to...
I don't know, and I refuse to discuss it.
I understand that, Tilly. Then, there can be no solution yet, can there? We know nothing about a solution. I am simply giving you back your life, as far as I can, and you are doing the same to me. Later we will see what happens. It will all come of itself. What do we know? We know nothing for ourselves. Knowledge will all come of itself. Do you understand?
No.
You will, later. You will live here with the children. You will see me hardly at all. I shall not see the children for a time. It will be as though I were on a journey. They are so small. Oh, I hope that they won't miss me, and that when they do see me again they will know me. So you will be alone, with the children. It may be that you will want me back then, that the former love will return. In my case, too, perhaps. We shall see. It will all come of itself. And we know nothing. Perhaps in years to come we shall be living quietly together again, with the children, or else...
What?
Or else you will be far away from me, and will have found your happiness with another. She put her hands before her eyes.
I don't see it. I don't know.
Now you are being honest. No, you don't know if you will come to care so much as that for Johann. And I will be honest too. I don't know if I shall ever care for you again. But we must wait, Tilly, and the best thing, therefore, is to leave each other, and not to talk to each other again until it has come of itself, and until we know. You will not be alone in the world, for if ever I can do anything for you, I will come to you. I shall never forget you.
Yes, perhaps that will be best, she said in a dead voice. I shall try to look at it like that, and to live alone, with the children. I shall not see Johann again.
No, on the contrary. You must see him.
Why?
So as to know. You will never be weak.
No, I shall never be that.
You know how he feels towards you.
How do you know?
I know you do. You know what he feels for you, but you do not know what you feel for him.
Addie, oh, Addie.
Don't deny it. Be honest. These are the last words, perhaps, that we shall exchange for quite a long time. I am going away now.
Now?
Yes. Write to me when there's any occasion.
Very well.
Goodbye, Tilly. She was silent, sat staring before her, with her hands clasped over her knees. No, she did not understand him, but she could not act otherwise than he wished. He was gone, and suddenly she felt very lonely. She heard him upstairs packing, rummaging in his cupboards, and she began to reflect sadly.
He acts differently, and speaks differently from anybody else. Divorced? Oh no, I don't want that, if he doesn't want it for himself. I, at least, not yet. No, nor ever. Oh, I don't know. I am fond of Johann. If I were free now, if I were a girl still. But Addie, the children, I don't know. That was why Addie thought it would be well for us not to see each other for a time. How he will miss the children. Oh dear, is he really going? Yes, I hear him upstairs, packing. What will people say? Not that it matters. We can say that he has to read quietly, out there, at Driebergen. We can tell people something of the kind, even if they do understand. I simply can't go back to Driebergen. Oh, how will it work out? How will it all work out? That is just what Addie doesn't know either. Do I? No, heaven help me. I don't know any more than he does. I am fond of Johann. Shall I grow fonder of him now that I am less fond of Addie? I don't know. Oh, if only I hadn't my children. As it is, I could wish, my God, how I could wish, for his sake and the children's, that I knew how to be happy at Driebergen, in that house of theirs, with all of them, and that I could go back to it. Shall I ever go back to it? Shall I be Johann's wife one day, after all? Oh, it is all so dark and uncertain. Addie says a solution will come of itself. We know nothing, he says. Must I let it come as it will? But how will it come? Oh, even Addie, who is so wise, can find no solution. There is no solution yet. Will there ever be one? Oh, if I could go back to the house down there, should I ever be able to? Perhaps years hence, perhaps never, who can tell? Is Johann really fond of me, not only because he admires me, not only for that? Oh, that was the only reason why Addie loved me. I know it now, I know it. That was his one idea, to have healthy children. Now we are parted for ever, or shall we come together again one day? Shall we ever become husband and wife again, or not? I do care for Johann. He is so matter-of-fact, so simple. I should have become very happy and simple with him, without all this thinking about things which I can't grasp or feel, and which came haunting me down there, at Driebergen, gradually. Oh, if I could only force myself to live there again! But perhaps I never can. Perhaps in 3 or 4 years' time I shall be Johann's wife, and have to give up the children, the poor children, to Addie.
Now she sobbed because she did not know. The days and months would drift past slowly and slowly before she knew. There is a sacred knowledge for ourselves, a knowledge so sacred that we know it only when the future is here. End of chapter 30. Chapter 31 of Dr. Adriaan by Louis Couperus. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The months drifted by.
It's strange, said Browse, that we haven't heard from Addie lately.
How long is it since we did? Asked Constance vaguely.
Nearly a week.
Yes, it must be close upon a week.
His last letters were brighter.
Do you think the travelling is doing him good?
He doesn't travel as another man would, in the 3 months that he has been away.
Yes, he will have learnt a good deal that will be useful to him, in his profession.
His letters were cheerful.
I'm longing badly to see him again. Listen to the wind.
That's the autumn coming.
The summer is past. This is our typical weather. Look here, out of my window. You can see the clouds coming up over the moor, as you never do downstairs, because the trees in the garden hide all the view.
Up here, it reminds me sometimes of the Hague, in the Kerkhoflaan.
But it's wider.
And finer.
There, they're coming up, the clouds. That must be rain. They're all grey and dark purple. I have never seen such purple as in our skies down here.
You are able to live under them now.
Now I am, but it took so long that I had to get old first. I'm old now, and it's all right now. Look, the clouds are drifting along. That means storm.
For days on end.
Oh, I am yearning for Addie. How long is it since we saw him? 3 months, isn't it? 3 months. What an age. We are all yearning for him.
His father is counting the days till he returns. Poor Hans.
Poor Henri. Even Mamma was asking the other day where Addie was.
She always knows him.
Ernst and Paul can't get on without him.
And he has an excellent influence on Alex. The boy's doing very well.
Yes, he's grown so calm and manly latterly.
Guy's letters are satisfactory, are they not?
Yes, it's kind of you, Browse, to take so much interest in all of us.
Well, I'm living with you all.
You belong to us.
It's like one family.
Family? Yes, there is such a thing as family. In the old days, I often used to think it was just a word.
No, it's there. Only...
Yes,
I understand what you mean. Sometimes it does not begin to take shape until we ourselves are no longer young. It was there for Mamma, whereas for us, at that time. But for Mamma it was an illusion, and
for us it is indeed a reality.
In so far that we think so, we old people.
No, it is so.
I am quite willing to believe it is. Yes, Addie ought soon to be home again.
And then?
I think he will stay here.
And Mathilde?
There, with the children.
That is not a solution.
No, but Addie says
that it will have to come.
Later, of itself.
I dare say he's right. How is she?
Reconciled. More reconciled. I saw her the other day.
Don't leave her to herself.
No, we are not doing that. It is not her fault, and she is a good mother to her children.
As you say, it's not her fault.
Nor Addie's either. It's our fault. Henri's and mine.
Why?
I don't know. I feel it is. It's all our fault. It's still the punishment, dragging along.
No.
Yes, it is. Our child was doomed not to be happy because of us.
No.
You know quite well that you too look on it like that.
Not entirely. If he had had certain understanding for himself.
He couldn't, because...
Hush. Say no more on that subject. There is a knowledge which is so sacred. Which of us has that certain understanding for himself? We all just let it come.
Look how dark it is growing.
Here comes the rain.
It's lashing against the windows.
Strange that even in this weather, the house and this room don't seem sombre, to me.
There is an air of so much affection in the house. If Addie would only come, if he would only come now. Tell me, Browse, what is your opinion? What will be the end of it? Will they ever go back to each other?
Possibly. Later.
You can't say it positively.
Oh, no.
Do you think that she cares for XXVIII?
It's difficult to say.
She doesn't know herself. Only the other day she told me so herself. She herself doesn't know. Will the children prevent her?
Who can say?
Is it right that Addie should let things decide themselves?
Perfectly right.
Say that. Say that again. I sometimes doubt. Is it right that Addie should let things decide themselves?
Yes, I am firmly persuaded that it is right.
Is she strong enough?
I think so. In that way, of course she mustn't sit still with her hands folded. She will have to find herself.
Oh, if she could only feel in sympathy with all of us. If she ever comes back, I swear that I shall...
What?
Nothing. I was thinking. Then I begin to hope that she and all of us will feel alike. And strangely enough, I see that in everything. We all want it. If she comes back, I'm almost sure that we shall all do a great deal to make her ours.
And to make her happy.
If she comes back, how delightful it would be if she came back with the children.
Delightful?
I mean delightful. Lives that have once been interlaced.
Are bad to pull apart. I agree. And Hans?
Oh, even he will try.
Who knows? Perhaps one day it will be like that.
For the present, there's nothing to be said.
No, nothing.
It's all still mystery and darkness.
Listen to the rain.
The sky is black.
What's the time?
Almost dinner time.
There goes the bell.
Shall we go downstairs? They went down the dark staircase. The wind howled round the house. The old lady was sitting at the window of the conservatory at the back when Constance and Browse entered.
"It's blowing hard," she said. "There are great branches falling from the trees in the garden."
"Aren't you too cold in here, Mamma?"
The old woman did not understand, and Constance put a shawl over her shoulders.
"Will you come in, Mamma, when you feel too cold?"
The old woman nodded without understanding. She remained sitting where she was. She already had something to eat, with Maricha to wait on her. She never sat down to table with the others. The second bell rang. "Come," said Constance. Paul was there and noticed how miserable Van der Welcke looked. "What's the matter?" he asked. Van der Welcke was carving. "I loathe carving," he said. "Addie always used to do it, or Guy." "I never learnt how," said Paul, secretly fearing the gravy. "Give it to me, Hans," said Browse. They were silent round the table. The wind howled outside. "The gas is burning badly," said Constance. "How nice-looking Mary is growing now that she's down here," said Paul. "There, you needn't go blushing. Your old uncle may surely pay you a compliment." "Well, Uncle Paul, I'm not as young as all that myself. I'm getting on for 30. "And you, Clasher," said Paul, "you're eating like a grown-up person." "I do eat nicely now, don't I, Auntie?" said Clasher proudly. Constance nodded to her with a smile. "Only Gerrit, she's not doing well," thought Paul. "How pale she looks. Ah, well, perhaps it'll all come right later for the poor child. He or another. Love, it's a strange thing. I never felt it." He felt a shiver pass through him and said, "It's cold today, Constance." "Yes, we shall start fires tomorrow." "It's blowing bitterly outside, and what a draught. I'm sure there's a draught in the house. What do you say, Ernst?" Ernst looked up. "There's no draught," he said. "I'm quite warm. You people are always feeling things that don't exist." "Why is it so dark today?" asked Adeline, as though waking from a dream. "The gas is burning badly," said Constance. "Troucher," said Van der Welcke. "Take the key and see that the meter is turned on full." "Grandmamma was very tired today," said Maricha. "Grandmamma hardly ate anything at all," said Adelaide. "She's getting very old," said Constance sadly. The meal dragged on. They exchanged only an occasional word. "We're very cosy among ourselves, like this," said Constance fondly. "Oh, I wish that Doreen would come and live here too." "Nothing will induce her to," said Paul. "No, I'm afraid not." A carriage drove up outside, drove through the garden. "Hark!" said Constance. "It's Addie," said Van der Welcke. "But he never wired." Gerrit had got up. She rushed outside, leaving the door open. A cold draught blew in. They all rose. The bell had rung. Troucher opened the door. "Oh, Addie, Addie!" Gerrit exclaimed. "Is that you? Have you come back at last? We have missed you so frightfully." It was he. She flung herself into his arms and embraced him with a little sob. They all welcomed him home. They no longer noticed the draught, no longer heard the wind. They hardly ate anything now, hurriedly finishing their dinner. "Come into the drawing-room," said Constance. "It's warmer there. I don't know why the dining-room should be so chilly." "We'll set the stove going tomorrow," said Van der Welcke. His face had brightened up, out of recognition. "Let's see how you're looking, old chap." He, the father, was so much excited that the tears came to Addie's eyes. The others left the two of them together in the drawing-room with Van der Welcke, while in the dimly lighted dining-room the old woman seemed to be asleep. "How are you, my boy?" "Very well indeed, Dad." "And now, you're staying here?" "Yes, I'm staying with all of you." "Yes, this is your home, and your wife?" "We shall see. That will settle itself." "So, there's nothing certain yet about Mathilde?" "No, nothing certain. I write to her once a month. She writes rather oftener. About the children. She's very good to them." "So, no talk of a divorce?" "No, no talk of that. Perhaps later all will come right between us. Perhaps, on the other hand, she will feel that she would sooner be free, in spite of the children." They both thought of Erzela. "So, you don't know anything yet?" "No, not yet. It will settle itself. It must settle itself some day. You see, my boy, I'm different. In your place, I should have fought a duel with Edzela. I should have had a divorce, if my wife didn't care for me, if she cared for Edzela.
Yes, father, I know. That's you. I'm different.
You're better.
No, not better. But whatever I may be, I'm first of all your son.
You, my son? You're my friend, my pal. Always have been.
And suppose I now wanted to be your son. I have come back feeling very sad and very tired, because I feel that I am much to blame.
Nothing has happened.
No.
What has happened?
Nothing at all. You're too fond of thinking. What you have to do now is to seek your own happiness, just selfishly. Perhaps, if I can, perhaps that will become Mathilde's happiness too. We shall see. But I don't feel certain of myself. I don't know things. And I now feel, not your friend and pal, but your son, father. I seem to feel it for the first time.
You always used to know things.
For you, Daddy, and for Mamma. But now
you're my son.
Yes.
My big boy.
Father.
Van der Welcke was standing in front of him. Addie was sitting down, and Van der Welcke now took his son's head in his hands.
Father, said Addie, I wonder if you realize how devotedly I love you. It's something that I feel only for my parents and for my children, not for any woman.
You're a funny chap, said Van der Welcke, but it's not your fault. It's your parents' fault.
If you only knew, Addie repeated, how devotedly I love you, and Mamma, and all of them here a bit too. If I had my children here, then perhaps they will come back later, very much later, with Mathilde. Look here, if that ever happens, we must all of us behave differently to her.
Yes, my dear boy.
Or try to.
Yes, old fellow, I know what you mean. We'll all do it, for your sake.
You see, she is my wife. I am to blame for everything. If you will try.
Yes.
If she comes back. Perhaps she won't come.
Do you want her to?
Yes, I do. I can't do without my children like this.
But you'll see them now and again.
Yes, so if she does come back, you promise, Dad?
That I'll try.
And if they will all try, then I shall be happy.
Yes, they'll do it, for your sake. But
if she comes back, I honestly believe that she will have learnt also to try, to like us all a little. You mustn't be angry, Addie, that it was not like that at once. She is so different from all of us. Yes, it's my fault.
No, my boy, don't go thinking that and worrying about it.
No, Father.
What you've got to do now is try to be happy among us all, to work, to pick up your work again, you know.
Yes, just so.
And then gradually to let things come, as you say. Would it upset you very much if she and Edzela?
Yes, because I should then feel my shortcomings towards her still more strongly, and also because of my children.
Perhaps things will come right later, my boy.
Perhaps.
Take it all calmly now, and don't worry, and just do your work here quietly.
Yes, Father. Oh, I feel that you are my father.
Perhaps for the first time. A different part for your old ruffian of a father.
You're not an old ruffian, you're...
Addie stood up and embraced his father. Don't squeeze the breath out of my body, said Van der Welcke. You're strong enough still, and you're looking well too. Your eyes look interested again, even though they're a bit too pensive, and they were always calm. Did you have an interesting time abroad?
I saw a great deal of misery, but also a great deal of goodwill.
That's it. Do what you can here, just simply, in your own surroundings. Oh, my dear chap, how glad I am that you're back.
Gerrit looked in at the door. May we never come in? Uncle Henri, you're being selfish about Addie.
You may come in, dear.
Addie took her hands. Will you be strong, Gerrit? She sobbed and laughed through her tears. I've tried to be all the time, Addie, she whispered. But for you. You know, life isn't all your first suffering. No, so you've told me. And you must believe it. It will help you. You have such a long future before you. Yes. Oh, Addie, but for you.
What?
I should have died. I have suffered so. I have suffered so.
And you see so much suffering around you. But life
isn't all your first suffering, as you say.
And you must believe it.
Yes, I'll try.
Constance entered. Am I to see nothing of my boy this evening? She asked banteringly. He took her in a clinging embrace. You've got him home for good now. She gave a sob. My poor child. Then I haven't lost you. Lost me? Why? A son. You've always been afraid of losing me, but you never have lost me. No, never. Tell me, dear, am I to blame? I am to blame, am I not? How? About Mathilde. No, you're not to blame. But if she comes back later with the children, Mamma, let us try. Yes, dear, yes. We will, won't we? We must try to bring ourselves into harmony with her as far as possible. Yes, yes, I will try. And all of us. Yes, all of us. That's so, Gerrit, isn't it? We must all. What did you say, Addie? I was saying, Gerrit, if Mathilde comes back later on. Yes. Would you be willing to try, with all of us, with Papa and Mamma, with every one of us, to get into harmony with her as far as possible, so that she... Yes. Oh, Addie, yes. I'll try. You will? Oh, yes. If she comes back. I'll try, Addie. I'll try. My dear, listen to it blowing. That's our wind, Mamma. Yes, always. Maricha and Adelaide had now gone into the dining room. Adeline and Emilie came after them. Why is it so dark in there? Asked Maricha. Grandmamma's taking a nap. We must take her to bed, said Constance. Adelaide turned up the gas. Auntie, cried Maricha in alarm. What is it, dear? Oh, Auntie, come here. Constance came in with Addie and Gerrit. It's Grandmamma, stammered Maricha, aghast. They all looked at the old woman. She was sitting as usual, sitting quietly in her big chair, with her veined and wrinkled hands folded in her black lap, her head hung back, framed white in her white hair. All knowledge was hers now, and her old mouth smiled because of it, encouragingly. End of chapter 31. End of Dr. Adriaan, the final volume of the Books of the Small Souls by Louis Couperus. Read by Phil Benson in Sydney, Australia.